We all have dark periods in our lives. We all face difficulties that seem insurmountable. We all encounter setbacks. And when we do, we're often tempted to throw in the towel. Most philosophers have tried to help us to reduce the amount that we suffer. They've offered consoling advice on how to make the pain go away. But there was one philosopher with a far more bracing take on the subject. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that all varieties of suffering and failure were to be welcomed by anyone seeking happiness. We should regard them as tough challenges to be overcome, in the same way as a climber might tackle a mountain. Almost alone among philosophers, he thought it was an advantage to have serious reversals in life. He wrote, "To those human beings who are of any concern to me, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill-treatment, indignities, profound self-contempt, the torture of self-mistrust, and the wretchedness of the vanquished." And to understand what Nietzsche meant, it helps to scale one of his favourite mountains, Piz-Corvatsch, high in the Swiss Alps. I'm now standing on the top of Piz-Corvatsch, and the view is extraordinary, sublime. There's a complete stillness in the air. Clouds are just drifting over us. We can see clouds below us, and then through the clouds, villages and forests. You feel like you're on the top of the world, and the air is curiously light, and you feel a kind of elated feeling. And I think that here we can start to understand why Nietzsche placed such an emphasis on the tops of mountains. It's at the very top of the mountain that come the finest views, but it's of course extremely hard to get to them. And this is symptomatic of his view that to reach anything that's worthwhile, to reach anything that's valuable, you have to go through an extraordinary amount of effort. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy is a simple idea: difficulty is normal. We shouldn't panic or give up when we experience it. We feel pain because of the gap between who we are at the moment and the person we could ideally be. It's because we can't master the ingredients of happiness straight away that we suffer as much as we do. But just to suffer. If hardship was all it took in order to be fulfilled, then all of us would be happy. The challenge is to learn to respond well to suffering, perhaps to use it to create something beautiful. Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the few philosophers to speak of the virtues of hardship and failure. He thought that we could all potentially benefit from them. As in them, what makes some lives fulfilled as well is the manner in which failure has been met. It's a surprising fact about Nietzsche that for a time he wished to abandon the bookish life in favour of becoming a full-time gardener. The plan never really came off, but cultivating plants taught him an important lesson. Nietzsche thought that we should look at many of our problems like gardeners. Now, gardeners come across a lot of plants with very ugly roots. If we take this one, I think it's a particular monster. Look at that, fairly ugly. But what gardeners are able to do is to cultivate something that looks initially very ugly into something very beautiful. Look at this, rather stunning. And Nietzsche thought this was a kind of metaphor for what we should do in our own lives. That is, take situations that look initially very horrible, very dark, and grow out of them something beautiful. There's something very uplifting about Nietzsche's botanical view of our problems. Even our most negative, ugly, dark feelings can be cultivated to produce something fruitful, but it's entirely up to us to make this happen. Envy, for example, might just lead to bitterness, but could, if properly trained, spur us on to compete with a rival and produce something wonderful. Anxiety might make us panic, or it might blossom into an accurate analysis of what's wrong, and so to peace of mind. And that's why Nietzsche wished misfortune on his friends, because he believed that hardship was a necessary evil out of which, if these friends were skilled, they might be able to harvest beautiful things. It's striking to visit the house where Nietzsche was born, right under the shadow of the Lutheran church where his father preached, completely unchanged since he lived here. Little Nietzsche must have grown up breathing an intensely religious atmosphere. So it's very surprising to read the philosopher, and find out what he had to say as an adult about his parents' religion. One does well to put gloves on when reading the New Testament. In the entire New Testament, there is only one solitary figure one is obliged to respect: Pilate, the Roman governor. And, quite simply, it's indecent to be a Christian today.
Nietzsche was rather against Christianity for the same reasons as he was against getting very drunk. In the short term, going to hear a service in a Christian church may make you feel quite good, in the same way as getting very drunk may make you feel quite good. But in the long term, Christianity, in Nietzsche's eyes, dulls pain. And in this way, it also dulls the energy that pain can give us to overcome problems and so reach real happiness.
There are undeniably certain differences between a pub and a church, but Nietzsche insisted that there were great similarities between the consolation available in both places. It seemed to him that the New Testament tried to make us feel better by saying that many things we thought of as problems are not in fact problems at all, but rather assets. To anyone worried about being too timid, the New Testament advises, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." To anyone worried about not having any friends, the New Testament says, "Blessed are you when men hate you, when they exclude you and insult you." And to anyone who worries about not having enough money and who envies those who do, the New Testament has these soothing words: "It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Nietzsche took such words to be catastrophic. Like alcohol, Christian counsel might dull pain, but it will also weaken the resolve to overcome the problem from which the pain has arisen. So how would Nietzsche have preferred Christians to behave when faced with difficulties? Chiefly by not pretending that they didn't want the things that were difficult to get. Nietzsche had a host of difficulties. He was poor and sick and lonely, but he never behaved in the way that he had accused Christians of behaving. That is, he never declared that health and wealth and love were bad. He accepted that he didn't have them, partly by choice, partly by circumstance. But he did not deny his wishes. He did not deny his pain. And so it perhaps comes as no surprise to find in the parish records of his burial here in Röcken that the church authorities have written, beside his name, the words, "A known Antichrist." Although his life was hard, we shouldn't think that Nietzsche was miserable all of the time. On the contrary, he often talked about fulfillment, particularly when he was here in the mountains. But when he does talk about fulfillment, he's thinking of something richer than the sort of cozy well-being we might imagine. He writes sarcastically about people who are addicted to the religion of comfortableness. He calls them small, mean people, hiding in forests like shy deer. But those of us who dare to climb up above the tree line will see the views and breathe the air. It's then that we'll understand the benefits of abandoning comfort for true fulfillment. As Nietzsche famously said, "That which does not kill me makes me stronger."
Like every philosopher in this series, Nietzsche was interested in making people happy. However, unlike every other philosopher in this series, he believed that extremes of pain were a vital component in reaching the kind of happiness he had in mind. Not everything which makes us suffer is necessarily bad for us. Not everything which makes us feel good is necessarily actually good for us. To regard extremes of suffering as an evil, as something to be abolished, wrote Friedrich Nietzsche, is a supreme idiocy.